So we're gonna call this the post of all posts. Okay.
Post of all posts.
Um, NGR is the Egyptian word for God, but also pronounced nigga. Now, there's Niger and black is Negro and all this other stuff like that and all these different languages. But America really did a number. America really did a number on people of color because people of lesser color found it so easy that I mean, this is bigger than King James shit. You know, they would sit back and my word for the day is Uncle Tom. Now, I've got two little pieces on there. First off, the first piece is when I go back to the person that I hold the last name of the family of the people that go into a descendants of the dirty red clay south of North Georgia. You know, it comes by way of, my granddaddy and his brother. His brother was, and my granddaddy were from Locust Grove, Georgia. Now, my granddaddy was two people. He was Edward Harris and he was Sonoy Edward Harris. Now, Sonoy Edward Harris is the one who had his contract was with the Porters. Now, before Atlanta was a city, not before Thrashersville, before Marthasville, it was privately owned by the B&O Railroad. And it was called Terminus. So the reason why it was called Terminus is because they were the only people who had this big circle thing that would turn. And you could put a certain amount of railway cards in there, and you would turn it around and put one in, take one out, turn it around, put one in, take one out. And it might take you a little while to get those things around, but this thing worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the time that black folks and Native Americans and Chinese people assisted in building one of the only few that the B&O Railroad owned terminus. When people talk about the Black Panther, they don't understand that the people from the West Coast picked the word and the phrase and the instinct of what the Black Panthers initially were in the history of people of color by way of the security team that worked exclusively for the B&O Railroad in an area called Terminus back in a day when things were not only kinder and gentler, but 2/3 of the 7-state radius that they called one of the last and the evilest of evilists of penal states. That the people from London and France and the real old world said, you know what? This is like some Superman shit. They would banish you to the forbidden somewhere like that, and you would. But if you survive the boat trip, because that's the only way you got there initially. Now, we live in a country where we have more people of other colors that have involuntarily invested their DNA into this experiment of sorts that was a more kinder and gentler version of the Tower of Babylon. We want to make it up to God and have a good seat. Y'all want to make it? Yeah. The farther they got up in the air, the harder it became for them to be able to communicate. And that's what made them stop at a certain point, because at a certain point, it was like, yeah, hold on. Y'all niggas need to stop. And so that's what happened. And nobody understands that that's Iraq. Iran, Iraq, down there. You feel what I'm saying? Already we dealing with a lot of these other things, but this is not the time for us to stay ignorant, because this is actually, okay, your grandmamas and your granddaddies and your great grandmamas and your great granddaddies had unprotected fucking sex listening to This Is the Dawning of the, hey, come on man, let it down, it's about to be that time. This is that time that they were just a little too premature and being able to have the experience that they were allowed at that one moment in time and the culture of a country who basically restricts their access to from their people to get whatever information in or to or from with their permission to some degree. Now, I'd like to back up behind that, but why? Why bother? This is just, what did I call this? This is just the post of all posts. Because we have to figure out what kinda or Wakanda thing are we really getting into when people are really getting into wearing that Chinese made kente cloth dashiki shit that you can buy on every corner. And yet and still, nobody can figure out why Martin Luther King was eulogized and celebrated and not anything but the only thing that they would allow on the dirt that only other highly metaphysical Masonic senses of awe that is America exist in, to such a degree that they slid Martin Luther King into this little cove of area or whatnot. And they did it in Chinese marble. And this kind of Chinese marble was so rare that only this dude that China allows to fuck with this marble at all was the only person allowed to do this. And by the time that they even decided, oh, let's make something to Martin Luther King, he was like, hey, I already got it. Dog, I'm already ahead of you. Literally. And so the whole understanding of what he described and had invented before we decided we was going to pay money to put a black guy down there with all the rest of them white folks down there, to such a degree that I was down there when we got an earthquake. You know what I'm saying? I was down there when people were sitting back going, this is a little bit more metaphysical than people understand. This is that kind of shit that Nostradamus and Nicodemus was writing and going, oh my God, if this is anywhere correct, and I can't understand why it could be this way, but I cannot imagine how frustrating and the caliber of suffering there must be for this amount of cultures to actually be forced into a blending of something that makes no sense today. In the medieval times when they lived BDSM, they didn't just whisper it. You know what I'm saying? And it was something, I mean, we just got a chance, right after that whole phrase got declassified, we got it in the film. Now, I don't know how many people don't like Ma Dear, but we had, what's my man's name? Merle, whatever, the first original dude back when we went from black and white to color TV. And he was, what's my man's name? That starts with a Merle or something like that. No. The dude that used to dress up like a guy and dress up like a girl. Jerry Lewis came in up under this dude like that. Okay, anywho, he was one of the original cross-dressers of sorts. And we had it on black and white TV back in the time when most people who are trying to act like they want to live in a 1950s style life can't really understand that shit came with it too, because that's the shit that we got on black and white TV. My word, you've been awfully hard on the beaver. Wow, Eddie Haskell here. Hey, Mrs. So-and-so. Hey, Mr. So-and-so. And that was people that now are just like us. Problem is, we can't take this amount of enlightenment, even though it's happening, whether you like it or not, from wherever else you're at. And I'm sitting here on man-made dirt that was intentionally decided to exist all the way back to Egyptians talking about this shit smoking. Yo, man, this shit's about to happen right around 2012, 2000. Yeah, man, we want to get in there. The Mayans, all these other motherfuckers, everybody's in this big show but us, and we are the show. Problem is that we can't figure out how to beat the show at its own game, and the only way to do that is to actually become who we are and not who we want to be. Now, you might not like who I am, but I'm probably the best thing you got right about now, and probably assuring that your DNA might exist into the next 26,000 years. Now, you might not think that to be important, but they ain't finished Soylent Green yet, or have they? With all this being said, I'm sitting back here, and where did I start with this whole story? The whole story was about,
White girl Jenny.
yeah, back down south. Out of everything else, there was this once little place called Georgia that actually existed in the 7-state radius that we would know today. That at that point in time, that it initially was the forbidden zone of banishments of all banishments. You know, the capital of it existed in a place that they only, kind of refer to as the Garden of Good and Evil. Now, in the process of that, nobody remembers that James Brown came from the second place, that they snuck the capital up, and nobody can remember what we culturally were doing, that they ended up doing that. And each time that they do that, we inherit a couple of more states. And in the process of that, a lot more of us start culturally forming into these kind of conditions. I used to travel and tour a lot, so I found myself kind of intrigued by traveling around the country and realizing that you can actually pick out certain slangs or whatnot about them that, was indicative to that area. And the more that I would meet people who traveled through areas, the more that I would meet people who would mix and mingle these slangs. So one minute they would say something sound like St. Louis, the next minute they say something sound like the Valley in California, and the next minute they saying some shit that I swear this guy's got to be a Gator hater from Tallahassee, telling you some good shit. And people can't understand that if they're not from the Hamptons and can understand it. Tall, brown-haired, gingers do have big dicks, but, that's not the point, is it? Milton Berle.
Oh, okay.
Milton Berle was his name. I'm going to leave everything on Milton Berle because from a 1950s perspective, if you want to make the country great again, we need Milton Berle to come back and throw on a dress and get out there and entertain you colonizers.